this episode of SENSimilla. I am your host, Will Reed. Today, I am joined by Joyce Gerber. She is the creator and host of the Canna Mom Show. It's a podcast dedicated to talking about, caring for, giving voice to women in the emerging cannabis industry, one canna story at a time. Joyce, I am very excited to talk to you. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm more getting used to being the guest. I've been doing this a little bit more, so I know how to answer questions instead of just asking them.
Well, for sure, I have some questions for you, but I think one of and I've been kind of preempting all of my conversations. At some point, when my listenership grows to 10, people will get sick of hearing this. But the goal of this podcast really is, in addition to hearing the story of our guests, it's about kind of
Right.
demystifying a lot of the cannabis industry and hoping that we can shed some light on the accessibility of it all. Like, it's really as hard to get into as kind of anything. And I think people have their trepidations in listening to it. So I think just hearing the story and hearing about your journey, any of our guests' journey is super important to anybody listening. That's really the point of what we do. So I want you to ask me questions too. More than
Okay.
anything, like, I realize that you're the expert. I've been listening to your podcast quite a bit, digesting a lot of your content over the last couple of weeks, just in preparation of this. And obviously, I found it, hugely insightful into um, an area of the cannabis industry that I obviously have, little perspective on, right? Right. I have my own perspective on it as a man trudging his way through this thing, but you know there is a story to be told, and again, I appreciate you being here to talk to me about it. Before we dive in, I just can you introduce yourself to our guests? Can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Thank you, Will. Thanks for inviting me to talk to your listeners. My name is Joyce Gerber. I am the creator and host of the podcast, The Canna Mom Show, and we record it right here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was just on an Elevate Northeast luncheon today, and I've started saying that we are now live from the Tip O'Neill Studios in North Cambridge. So for any of you political junkies out there, Tip O'Neill was a famous politician in Massachusetts. He was the Speaker of the House during the Reagan years, and his dad built my house, and he lived here as a child. So I have this weird um, uh, connection to Tip O'Neill. So live from the
Interesting.
Tip O'Neill studio. So that's where we are. And I'm a politician in my background. So that's a whole nother story.
A
Um,
hugely famous politician, from my youth and growing up, and especially in New England. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, so just a little bit south of where you're at. But yeah, that name I would remember. The local news, that name ringing out through the local news in my house in the late '80s and '90s. So for sure.
and the truth is, I live in North Cambridge. I literally live in the neighborhood he lived in his whole life. He lived here. He lived here as a child. He moved across the street to another house. That's where he lived as an adult, and people really know him. And when I was in my political phase several years ago, and I actually walked around talking to people, everybody had a story about Tip O'Neill.
Interesting. Well, soon
Yeah.
enough, it's going to be Joyce Gerber that they have stories about.
Haha.
You've been talking to so many people. It's going to be really difficult to think otherwise. Um, I have a so before we get into cannabis and your podcast and all that stuff. So you graduated from Connecticut College with a BA in religious studies. I graduated from St. Lawrence University with a BA in religious studies.
Interesting. No one's ever admitted to me they've graduated religious studies, except for my friends who've gone on to get like their PhDs and like some
Religious studies.
religious stuff. Like they've actually teaching, like they're academics. Only my academic
Yeah,
friends
yeah.
admit it.
I think at some point my parents were hopeful that I was going to be a priest or something terrible, but w- I I'll tell you why I did it if you tell me why you did it. You go first. Or I'll go first. I'll go
Okay, you
first.
go first. Go first.
I'll go first. I'll break the ice. So, religious studies to me wasn't as difficult as history, like taking history courses, but it was as interesting to me. Additionally, the real reason why is I thought as a young, 20-year-old, late teenager, in my 20s, whatever, that it would legitimize to my parents my double major in music, which is another thing I'd like to talk to you about.
Mhm.
My double major in music, it would kind of legitimize that. They paid all this money for me to go to this private school for 4 years, and I was basically just writing music and playing guitar, which I would have done if
That's what my
I
son's
was.
doing, and we're paying for that, so no.
Yeah, exactly. So is he legit? Is he trying to legitimize that path with, like I did, with a, a major that seemed on paper to be no? You're shaking your head no.
He is all out. My son is just an all out. He was born this way. He saw a ukulele. He was 2. He didn't give it back. I've been a band manager. He has done this his entire life. I've worried about it. I'm like, "How do you make a living at
Mm,
this?" And I'm telling you, when you go all in first thing, like, he's all in. He performed, like, he didn't there was no side issue. He was just it was sink or swim for him. So, yeah, there was no
right.
although, now he builds guitars, so that's like business, and I call it it's a learning thing. It's not just a playing. It's like it's an industry. Music is an industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing. So similarly, like I started a band in college,
Mhm.
and I think at the time I was too naive to understand that that was me being an entrepreneur, right? And I think so that fear of
Right.
how am I going to make a living? Like, how am I going to pay my bills? I'm traveling around the country playing a guitar. This is ridiculous. How's this going to work? Um, is something that I experienced, a few decades later as I started my company. It was like, and considering leaving my job, it's like, oh my God. Yeah, I had some of those same fears, but I had the hindsight, hindsight being 2020 of at least having that perspective of saying, you've done this before, you've been scared before, but you got through it, right? So I'm not letting you off the hook. So religious studies.
You know so I will say, if you ask me when I went to college, I wanted to be a writer, and I am still a writer. I'm like a secret writer. I've been writing forever. I write children's novels that no one wants to publish, and I now have an idea for a, new genre of literature that I call cannabis chick lit.
Ooh.
Oh, I know, excited. I actually talked to, the woman who wrote Higher Etiquette,
Lizzie
P
Post.
Lizzie Post. So I saw her
Hmm.
at the Cannabis Wedding Expo 2 years ago, I guess, when you could just
Hmm.
still go to expos, and I
Shout out
remember
Lizzie Post.
Lizzie Post, awesome
Hmm.
book. You need it on your
Hmm.
coffee table, and, I
Former
am a lady.
office mate of mine.
I wear pearls. I mean, like, the whole thing. This is legit. I really am a lady who wears pearls and plays tennis, and, so I asked her, I'm like, "I have this idea, Lizzie." And she's like, "I think it's a good idea."
Yeah.
So I wanted to write, but I will say, and this is the weird thing about being I self-identify as an entitled white person. I am a
Mm,
white Jewish woman. I
mm,
didn't I was given a lot. I've given a lot of education. I went to private schools, and I went to a small Connecticut college. And when I got there, everyone was sort of like me, and I never quite felt good enough. And I was in
yep.
a writing class my freshman year, and I don't know what happened. The teacher said something to me that kind of shook my confidence,
Mm,
and I decided that writing wasn't the thing I could do.
hmm.
So, that's I mean, it was sort of sad, right? But in
Yeah.
the midst of it, I found religious studies because some of my friends were taking them, and you had to take a class in it.
Yeah.
And when I was in college, I traveled on a boat around the world. It's a
Okay.
whole nother story. And I could see that I have a certain perspective on the world. I was given this perspective. This is not the only way to live. And I could see that by
Right.
traveling. And I was very young, so I was very impressionable. I was only 20.
Sure.
I could see this, and I could see religious, how, you know, I say I'm a person of faith. I attend services every Friday. I'm very
Hmm.
involved with my temple. I wouldn't call myself a believer, but
Yeah.
because I have studied religion and I've seen how every human needs this. They need boundaries, and these are just stories. And that the faith that was given
Yes.
to me is a gift. This is the faith that I was given, but there are a million ways to live a life. And I definitely think by studying religion, that's something I understood.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's interesting to hear you put it into that perspective. Because for me, it was that, but it shook my faith, which at the time, growing up an Episcopalian, it was pretty loose to begin with, to put it lightly. But I think like having this perspective on historical references across multiple forms of religion um, shook me. I think the way maybe like a lot of college students, they come out uh, entitled, think, even more entitled than when they went to college or when they started thinking like, oh, I know everything. But for sure, I feel like I
Oh,
came
no, I
out of
think I
that.
came out I came out the other way. I think I came out just questioning. I mean, when I came out
Yeah,
and
same.
and I'm still a pretty straight-laced person, and my journey into cannabis is a little complicated. I always say it's not my natural habitat, but I think by having that background, by coming out of college and then seeing that the world wasn't what I knew it to be, it wasn't just my little privileged place, and that the people who weren't achieving, it wasn't because they weren't smart or confident, it's because there are
Right.
a lot of other things going on. That's what I learned at college and traveling, and that sort of started my journey. When I got out of college, I worked for nonprofits. I got a degree in urban policy. I'm really invested in affordable housing development. That is really why I went to law school. Then I went to law school because I was meeting all these attorneys who didn't seem any smarter than me. That's the truth of it.
Interesting.
I was 29. I was sort of making, and I had been married for a while. And I asked my husband, we were trying to decide if I could have children or go to be a professional. And, I'm 55 now. So it's been a journey. And women are still making these choices, which is sort of making me sad. But, I decided I was going to go to law school and I was putting off having children. The third year of law school, I was pregnant with my son, Josh. So
Hmm.
I did something no man has ever done. I finished law school pregnant, took the bar pregnant, passed the bar pregnant, proved my brain and my uterus work at the same time. But
Imagine
then I had a
that.
baby. I know it's craziness. It's insanity. And the craziest part,
Who told you you could do that?
I nobody. That was the problem. I'm like the canary in the coal mine. I think I'm the beginning of
Uh-huh.
that generation of women behind me. I'm the first generation of Generation X. We were told we could do everything and we did. And then we got to this point in life where we were, kind of actually doing everything and things
Hmm.
sort of started to fall apart. Anyway, so when I took the bar pregnant, my friend Anjanette, she was pregnant too. It wasn't like I was alone. This is like women were doing this just because I don't know. We just it's like almost like we didn't know we couldn't. So fast forward, I had my
When you
son
say, well,
and
hold on. When you say that, when you didn't know you couldn't, you mean like have a professional life and be a mother and be successful and be smart and be, have a fulfilled life beyond a baby.
motherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
that
I
that
mean,
that was the
yeah,
plan.
that's a battle.
Anyway, so I had a baby and then I realized the world is not set up for moms. And I'm a privileged person. My husband had a very good job. He had very good health insurance, which is really what kept him in his job. And, each time there was an issue with the kids or whatever, I kept my professional life took a nick. Each time it took a little more until I got to the point where, fast forward, I was in and out of work. I've been a family law attorney, a divorce attorney. I did work in the housing field for a while. Um, and I was that mom. I was a really, really good mom. You invested, over invested mom is what I became. Never hold down a real, I just couldn't keep my professional life going continuously. That was sort of the truth of it.
Do you think like how how much, and we're really going to get into the weeds with this one, but like
Mhm.
how, how did that impact your identity, or even more so like when you made the decision to maybe re-enter the professional world, or maybe just refocus from mom time back to life, everything else time, like how do you feel like that impacted your identity, and then how do you feel like how did it I feel like it's, when you like walk the halls of your high school after you've graduated, that feeling, was it a little like that, like
No.
coming back to it? It wasn't. Okay, tell me, I have no idea.
So, I mean, the truth of it is, I'm an ambitious woman with a lot of
Mhm.
education, just like my brothers, just like men out there. And I just, something happens when you have a baby. Children do not raise themselves. Something happens to you. I just,
Hmm.
and when my son was born, everything in my life shifted. I wanted to work. That was how I
Yeah,
identified. I never, I would, what I would say growing up is I wasn't really quite sure what I wanted to be, but there was no way I was going to be a stay at home mom in the suburbs.
totally.
So here I am, I'm 34, I have a baby, and I'm making these choices, and I am deciding to stay home and be that mom and invest in that time. And you do lose. It's just the truth of it. You lose a bit of your identity, but there's something. It just has to be done. I can't explain it any
Totally.
other way. I've made it through the fire, and I will tell you, when I went back to work and I became a relauncher. It's like a term for women who have been in and out and in and out. I would give I would literally give talks at the Women's Bar Association, and my advice was always don't drop out. Because
Yeah.
once you leave, the difficulty in coming back in is that you've become invisible, which is sort of how I ended up in cannabis, because I was in and out of the workforce long enough that at some point people couldn't see me. Like my resume didn't make sense to them. How could you have all this education and sort of have experience? Or if I took a lot of the education off because I didn't want a high powered job, it looked like I didn't have anything. I did look like I was that God knows what it looked like on my resume. So I was sort of
Right.
caught in a weird bubble. I become invisible in my 50s. And that's how I ended up in cannabis.
Well, in looking back, is there something, so how did you just phrase it? Don't what did you say?
Oh, drop out.
Don't drop out. I mean, like, how do you I don't have kids. I am an amazing uncle. I have, lots of god nephews and nieces and all of that stuff. I am amazed. It is flabbergasting to me. It is not something that computes in my brain, how that works, right?
Doesn't.
Uh, right. It's impossible. It's an impossible scenario, and especially now during COVID, where
Oh, yeah.
childcare is basically non-existent.
Those
Like,
mamas, they all need cannabis. I
oh
mean,
my
every time I
goodness.
talk to anyone stressed out, and I will say this is true. So
Mm,
when my children were young, I was a divorce attorney. I was pretty stressed out. My husband had a job. I did not consume cannabis. That was not in my repertoire. This wasn't even like a possibility. I didn't even know you could. I could drink a bottle of wine though, and no one thought anything of it.
mm,
But I know now, I mean, I'm going to be a much better grandmother. I know that I could have been much more present. I could have been much more fun. I could have just actually existed in their world in a much healthier way, I think. I was a
mm.
good mom. I never, they made it to all their appointments. They did all their activities. I was very
Yeah,
involved with their school. I was that kind of mom. We had dinner every night. There was never, our bills were paid. I did everything. But in terms of personal care, if I had been a cannabis consumer, I think I just would have been happier. I
yeah,
kind of made it through. And my whole generation of women, we were told to lean in more by Sheryl Sandberg. I say this all the time. She said,
right.
lean in, and I couldn't figure out where I was supposed to lean into. And our generation, we're practically perfect. We've done everything. We've proven that we can get our degrees and we can look good and we exercise and we take care of our children and we take care of our parents. So we're practically perfect, but we are never quite good enough. And I think that's also where the cannabis world comes in. It can kind of help shift that perspective for women.
Um, so just going back to my question in terms of not dropping out, is there and I'm sorry, it's saying my internet connection is unstable. I hope that I'm not frozen on you. But is there now that
No, you're
you're yep, now that you're kind of through it mostly, right? Is there any advice you would give to young moms listening to this who maybe are feeling that uh need, that imbalance or that inability to find kind of a way of being a great mom but not dropping out from everything else?
I mean, I'll say this is sort of the mission of the Canna Mom Show. When I talk to women who are building this industry, I talk a lot about micro leadership. If we can hurt everybody in this world so badly by all these microaggressions, we
Mm,
each can lead a little bit with our own micro leadership. So this is my teeny tiny micro leadership in the world of creating a world, an industry that is built for caregivers.
mhm,
So I talk to women across the country who are really doing this. They're really setting up these businesses and they are really doing this thing. And businesses look a certain way because white men have always been the leaders of them. That's why businesses look that way. And I've spent my whole career, and most of my friends have been spending their years trying to fit into this world that doesn't really want us and
yeah,
doesn't really see our value. So the idea that the next generation can set up a business where you are allowed to take time off to care for people, that's accepted. You don't have to hide it. You don't have to
yeah,
hide the fact
totally.
that you have children. I mean, I can't even tell you, I would be at work at 5:30 and someone would be like, "Can you do this?" I'm like, "No, I literally have to go pick up my kids. No one else does this. It's just me." So, maybe the next generation, the young moms I talk to, if you want to be in the cannabis industry, this is a great time. And you can start volunteering, you can start connecting, you can start being involved with organizations you want to be with. So when you're ready to take the next step, they'll know who you are. And I used to give the example of Sandra Day O'Connor
Mhm,
on the Supreme Court. So
mm,
she took time off. She did have children, but she stayed very involved with the Republican Party. and that's how she stayed connected in the world, and that's how
It just froze from, yeah,
we're in New
you
Hampshire.
were
Are you?
talking about Sandra Day O'Connor and how she,
Okay.
was able to leave the Supreme Court, but
Stay in the
also,
Republican Party. Yeah.
yeah, just stay active. And I think that's an important
Mhm.
thing. And I do agree with you that the cannabis industry for sure, and purely because it's new, right?
It's
Like,
new, which is why I'm here. It's new.
yeah, totally. And that's the next question I have for you. But before that, it is new, and there is no, there's companies, there's people doing it certain ways, there's people bringing in um business models from outside of the cannabis industry and applying them to the cannabis industry, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. uh but it's all new and there's no playbook on this, and to me that's super exciting because I'm one of those CEOs who, there's so, like, I love knowing what I don't, knowing that I don't know everything. It's so exciting to me. And to that point, it's exciting to get to talk to people like you and you know anybody who's just got this perspective and is able to just shed light onto this. We have so many female founded businesses that work with CannaPlanners that are, oh my God, they've impacted me. They've inspired me just on so many levels in regards to how they approach it. It is, I don't want to say it's like lower stress, but it's like a different kind of stress dealing with a lot of them. Because a lot of them got into it because of motherhood, right? We have there's several CBD brands that were, pardon the pun, but born as a result of you know child rearing and whatever.
Oh, I
There's
mean
just,
that the story, and I will say the stories I hear are pretty consistent. So, my own story, I mean, my own story of how I got in here. So 2016 was the same year that I'm in Massachusetts, obviously. I'm in Massachusetts. 2016 was the year we voted on adult use.
yep.
I've lived here my whole life. I didn't know everyone was smoking this. Whatever. I also 2016 I went out to Colorado with my husband and we did a tour, a private tour just for fun because we thought it'd be fun. And I call it my cannabis awakening. I just I couldn't believe what it was. I saw the industry part and the woman who gave us the tour was just phenomenal. And she told us a little bit about the history and she just talked about it in a very normal way.
Hmm.
I never expected to work in it. We came back to Massachusetts. My kids were teenagers and they were psyched that I told them. Like we basically came home and said, everything we know about cannabis is wrong. And they were like, yeah.
Mom and
So
dad
that
are
was,
cool.
oh no. Well, even now, so my son's a senior in college, and some of his friends were talking about they wanted to intern for me. They thought it was kind of cool. And I'm like, isn't that so funny that people think I'm cool? And he's like, yeah, I
Who
don't get it.
knew, mom?
Anyway,
Who knew?
so that was 2016. Then 2017, a contract I was working on ended. And that's when I
Mhm.
became invisible. I really couldn't get a job. It was exhausting. And I kept
Got
meeting
it.
more and more women like me. Like just, I was out there. I was literally becoming an advocate for women who couldn't get jobs. Like there's a whole industry like built on women who can't get jobs about whatever. It's a whole world out there. So that was 2017. It was very upsetting and depressing. And I ended up going into like basically career therapy and trying to figure out what to do next because it was just exhausting and depressing. And I mentioned cannabis because I could see the law firms were starting to hire cannabis attorneys.
Mhm.
And she was like, that's a great idea. And you only need one person to say it's not crazy. And that was
Totally.
really my journey. That's how I started. So that's 2017 was really the okay, I'm gonna leap into this and I'm gonna learn about it. And that's how I met, Beth at Elevate
Mhm.
Northeast and Kara and Laura. And I went to a meeting in Boston. And I first heard the word endocannabinoid, which I thought was
Whoa.
a made up word. And
Totally.
so
It
that was
sounds
sort of
made
my
up.
journey. It does. The more I said it,
All
yeah.
words are made up,
And it
really,
felt
but
very underground. Yeah, but it felt very underground at that point, still
yeah.
for me, I wasn't telling people what I was doing. I was just sort of learning about it. And 2018, I ended up working as I was the executive producer for another podcast. That's how I really learned the industry.
How did you get, so where did broadcasting come into the whole thing?
I say I got into this through a series of desperation, isolation, and a lot of rejection. So
Yeah,
I just
I totally
kept
get it.
I kept trying. Nevertheless, I persisted tattooed on my back someday. The thing is, what am I
Mhm.
supposed to do? I'm not, you know, I've done a lot of other things that I thought I would succeed at that I didn't, but I just kept going. And I have to kind of take ownership of being a mom. Like I never thought that my primary identification would be mom, but I'm owning it. I am.
Yeah.
That's the thing I've done best.
Not everybody's an entrepreneur, and not everybody is set out to do their own thing and start their own business. However, I will say that there's nothing more motivating than th- that survivalist feeling. Like, um, not wanting to be irrelevant is something that I can completely empathize with. Like that's irrelevance is something that I've felt so many times, especially like starting a company. Like there's so many times that little validation that you got from whoever it was
Yeah, yeah.
is like those little things. I would say to anybody listening, like listen for those and appreciate them, because it's so easy to think that your idea is stupid or that you're crazy or that you're going to fail. And maybe those things are
Oh,
all
yeah.
true. Um,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know. No
But you don't
judgment.
know unless whatever they
But
say, you don't know until you try. And
that's
yeah,
exactly right.
and at some point my husband said to me, I don't think he meant it meanly though, but he's like, I don't think you could work for anybody anymore. You're a little unmanageable. I'm like, I don't
Totally, you have to be. Of course, that's why you're an entrepreneur. This is like personality quality number one is you can't work for people. you know,
I know
that's definitely a
this is the truth.
requirement.
This is the truth of it. When I took those, I got to do like a bunch of career tests and just to see my personality and to figure out where I should fit in and the next steps. And she said to me, I could not have designed a job that was worse for my personality than divorce attorney, which
Wow.
I was like totally validated because I'm like, I sucked at it. I always wanted people to get back together. I had, I once had a client was like, Joyce, you have got to get help. I'm like,
You're
I know,
speaking to the son of a divorce attorney. So,
Oh,
wills and estates and divorces. So like, and actually like that's an important thing. Like I think about the energy. So my father's an attorney. He practiced this same sort of law that, or he does practice the same sort of law that you did. And I'm, as an observer of my father, like I'm aware of the energy output that takes. Like, you just said it, like you wanted those people to be back together or whatever. Like that's a emotional attachment that's way too deep for any attorney to feel, but it's impossible because you're a human.
and we are not therapists in any way, shape, or form. And at
Oh
the end of
man.
my basically you're a fighter. You are hired to fight people's fights. And I had some ridiculous fights. Like usually the big ones are like around the kids and Christmas. I mean, I was once in court for a couple of hours trying to figure out when Christmas Eve day started. What
For
point of the day did
visitation rights,
Christmas
I mean.
Eve? Yeah, so for
Yeah.
and I cannot even tell you how many hours I was in that fight for. And then at the end of my practice, I was doing collaborative law, which makes sense because you have to agree to talk to each other. And I remember the first negotiation I had where we didn't have to go to arbitration or whatever to get a value of a house. We just put a couple of numbers on a board and circled the one in the middle. I think I almost fell out of my chair, but people just really didn't buy into that. And it's
Not the most popular kind of law anymore.
but anyway, and I used to make fun of like and the thing is I truly used to make fun of this world, the earthy, crunchy, intentional, healthy world. And now I think that every divorce should start with an intention. We should start like just being
Yeah,
kind to each other. So I've had a big
absolutely.
transformation.
Well, I was gonna say, like, that energy of dealing with clients as an attorney, you know, again, as an observer, not a participant, uh, sometimes that energy didn't feel great to me. Just watching my dad like do his job, sometimes it felt bad, right? Because of all the things that go along with planning out your will, your estate, your divorce, like all that stuff's not fun, right? And that's like a tangible feeling. contrast to what you're doing now, which is, manifesting, maybe a more positive career choice, uh, and being in control of the whole thing. It's an entirely different feeling, right?
Yeah, and then it's taken me a long time to get to this point, and, I also had to go through that whole woman thing of, when I was an attorney, I charged by the hour. My time had value because it was monetized,
Yeah.
and then I had to go through that whole thing where my time wasn't monetized, so do I still have value? I mean, and that's a big head game. I mean, seriously, that's a strange head game that we play with ourselves. Um, so, I'm back in this world. I went in and I am upfront. I went into cannabis because I thought I'd make some money. That really hasn't worked out yet, but I am close. But
Same.
I become an advocate. Like this world needs advocacy, and it needs
Hmm.
advocacy from people that the people who make decisions can hear. And that's the truth of it. Like, I look like this, I wear pearls, I look like a middle-aged white lady, entitled white lady. I can walk into a room. I like municipal law, that was the other thing I like to talk about.
Hmm.
And Massachusetts especially is very local rule, and when these towns are ruled, they're, white men for a lot of the small towns. So if you're gonna go
Sure.
into a hearing or if you wanna have an advocate, I always thought that's something I would be part of to talk to people about what this really looks like. But, I've on the flip side is I'm really talking to canna curious women like me who we know the least. We literally know the least. We were brainwashed and told that it was so dangerous for us, and our you know, people went to jail if you had a joint. Like, we really believe that, and it killed
Yeah.
brain cells. But I understand that women my age, we need it the most, and we understand it the least. So I really want to be a trusted voice. I want to be someone that you can listen to and hear these stories because that's really kind of goes back to religion. We are always, all religions are stories. Everything is a story. And on the show, I'm telling people stories, and these stories are what change people's mind. It's not facts. Facts don't seem to work. It's stories.
100%. Very well said. I couldn't agree with you more, especially the advocacy point. Like, you know, early in my career and in getting into cannabis, actual advocacy, being at the state house and talking to politicians and local town count, like all that stuff was important for me. It was important. The advocacy was absolutely important, and I've mentioned this before. The advocacy itself definitely important, but it was also like meetups. It was like meeting meeting like-minded people, who had similar
Yeah.
goals, and that was as important to me. Like being able to meet these people in my local community who had similar ideas and
And
were
that's especially
serious.
that's especially true in the mom world, and so again, I'm not when we started the show, they wanted to call me the Canna Mom, which is ridiculous because I am not a I am not a Canna Mom. We call it the Canna Mom Show, like the Daily Show.
Mhm.
But these moms, these young women, these people are using cannabis for their children, are using it for their own health. And the story over and over again is not like mine. The story I hear over and over again from these women is they used it to heal themselves or heal someone they loved because they got to the end of their ropes for traditional or for pharmaceuticals, you know? And this is
Yes.
like such a and so this is the stigma and this is the thing that we need to keep kind of open up. So I've joined Clubhouse. So I've been in those rooms with the
Yeah, yeah.
Canna moms and I've been hearing them, because this is not my story, but these young moms who've been using it and are ashamed or have issues and still can't be open, yet they know that it's helping them. So I don't, so that's the transparency. Those are the stories. I mean, that's really the Canna mom, the caregiver angle that this is a health and wellness product. It's healthy for us. It's been healthy for these moms who have, these are the real Canna moms who have healed themselves or healed their children.
Totally. I mean, that's for you know for me, that's exactly the point. Like there's business, but there's also the mission, and the mission for CannaPlanners is normalization. And in the onset, that was just doing what we do and make things pretty and make things accessible and make things, put things online and let people see them. And let's avoid those pitfalls of that keep this thing uh in the stigma, right? But now it's content, right? Now it's this, and you're right. Like that's more important. People are seeing, oh, there's a world of consumers out there who are engaging or have a preconceived notion about cannabis, and for sure CBD even, right? And I think that there's a huge responsibility on the shoulders of all these companies who are pioneers in this industry to change that and really, break that mold. It's a huge responsibility. So, good for
But
you.
they're not
Keep
all
talking
doing
to
it.
people.
I mean,
No, they're certainly not.
and I do say this on the show: never buy your CBD products in the gas station. And
No.
at this point, you kind of almost
No,
need to
definitely
know.
not.
You need to know who the farmer is. I mean, I don't even know what to say anymore. You kind of need to know either the owner of the business and trust them enough to believe that they're getting their product where they say it is, or you really need to know the farmer who's sending it to the. I don't know. It's so underregulated, overregulated.
Yeah.
But these
And
products
that's
work. That's
another
the thing that fears me. They're
responsibility.
like, yeah, people will try these
Yeah.
products and try bad products and think it doesn't work. That's my fear.
Totally. But you're absolutely right. And I think that's another, and again, I'm just speaking,
Yeah.
from the perspective of CannaPlanners, but that is another responsibility that we do not take lightly. Like we do not, we have to pre-vet, every sale is great. But we have a responsibility to make sure that we're engaging with companies that are quote doing the right thing. I'm doing air quotes for people listening. Um, and that's not easy because it's the rush. Everybody's getting in.
it's not easy, and yet sometimes you don't really know who you're talking to. I mean, I guess that's sort of the problem. And I will say the women I'm meeting
Yeah.
in this industry are really, I've been on both sides. I've been with, I've seen the white lawyer man world, the white businessman world. Like I was in that, I was spinning around there for a while because that's where I thought I would live or
Yeah.
invest my time. But I'm glad I didn't. But on the other side, these women are trying to do their best to build these businesses. So, and you want to, I don't know, they're in it for the right reasons, and they've healed themselves, and they're elevating the professionalism, but they still don't have the capital. So that's, I mean, forever, it's always about money, but that's the social equity. That's the woman. That's always the issue. So the money is
Well, let,
buying,
let's
buying stuff
let's
still. Yeah.
spell it out for the listeners. Why is it important for women to take such a lead in this industry?
Why? Um,
Why?
I believe.
Yes.
I've been like advocating for like
Let me
a cabinet position
asterisk.
for this.
Yeah, yeah. Let me asterisk that. It sounded like I was like, I don't know why. I have my.
Why do
I,
you think?
well, I
No,
for all the
I'll
reasons.
let you.
Yeah, you go. You go first.
All right. So, I mean, I will say I got into this industry because it's new, and you never, ever, ever, ever get to be part of something new. And I'm a I'm an older woman. I don't know if I'm gonna ever like I don't know what's gonna happen with my life in this industry, but I kind of am excited to be part of building it. And I
Absolutely.
think the idea of having a female plant, the cannabis plant is a female plant, and don't come from this world of I'm moving there, but I eat meat. I I'm like I'm just I don't know. I don't think of myself as an earthy, crunchy person, but I'm meeting these women who have been in this world for a long time, and they're spiritual and they're connected to the earth. And this plant is powerful,
Yes.
and they are proving the power of it, and they've channeled that power in a different way than America usually does, which is always through money, right?
Hmm.
So they're building their industry, and I think across the country, I mean, because this is so state dependent, I mean, you can see the differences across different states, like how it's working and how it's not working. But I can tell you across the country, I am meeting Canna moms across the country. So there are women who have been invested in this plan forever across the country in every state, and they are ready to take ownership and to help us, the rest of us, understand how to use it properly, as opposed to it coming from the top down money again, where men are setting up structures just because they know they can monetize it and fooling us with marketing. So I
Yep.
don't know. I'm hoping that women can start building this up, and I see it on these smaller scales. Like I just interviewed these women in California from the Garden Society,
Mm.
and they were doing they were doing like garden parties, like Tupperware parties to introduce women to these products, which is so
Mhm.
brilliant because it's so personal.
Absolutely. The without over using overly feminine derived terms, the
Mhm.
nurturing of the industry, the being the caregiver of this thing, and simply put, making sure it doesn't get fucked up. Right, like that's the biggest thing, which men are notorious to do. As speaking for men, which I can, uh we love to come in and
Speak for
just,
all of them. Speak for all of
yeah,
them.
I will. I will. All white men. I can speak for them. I have a card. Uh,
Have
um,
the white man. I'm carrying the white man
I
card.
I have it. It's in my wallet. Um, jeez. Uh, I think that having that, being able to promote, support, encourage more women to get into this now it's totally important. It's so vital.
And I'm also, this is my second season of doing the Canna Mom Show,
Yeah, yeah.
and I do say I'm a white entitled Jewish woman. That is who I know. I call this industry my new JCC, my new
Hmm.
Jewish Cannabis Connection, because it's kind of
Okay.
unbelievable. But I have been making very intentionality. I want to be very. I'm a local podcast with a national, and actually I'm in Canada, so I'm an international appeal. But this season, I'm really trying to focus on Black women in the industry, specifically
Hmm.
in Massachusetts and New England. And their stories are very different, and the
Yeah.
capital issues, though I, I mean, women like me who are
Exponentially
investing
different.
in this,
Hmm.
they're just exponentially different. Like, so the women in California, they are startups and they're having some trouble financing, but they're in a world where they can get funding. The Black women I'm meeting, the self financing and the debt they're carrying and the things they're doing to get into this industry are so it's just exponentially different. So the support they need and the anytime I can meet a woman who's really in this and I'm trying to support them on the show and talking about their product and I don't know, it's a David and Goliath story and we all know that, but this is one of
Well,
those things. If you don't
for
tell the
those
stories, nobody knows it.
women like that, who might be listening to this, what resources can you point out for them? We'll link them in the description. We've
Yeah.
already got Elevate New England. We'll link them in the description. A great
So
organization for female founded businesses. I mean, all can of businesses,
yeah.
really.
I mean, I go to
Um,
them for everything. I just,
yeah.
I used to say I wanted to be Beth when I grew up. So
She's the best.
S I mean, the funding thing will not go away. I mean, I'll just say my own. I couldn't even get a for my podcast. I mean, the banking issues in cannabis are ridiculous. It took me
Oh,
six months to find a bank that would open up a checking account for me. I do not sell the
preach.
product.
Yeah.
I do not touch the product. I don't do anything with it. All I do is talk about it on the show, and it took me so long to get a bank account. So, the people who are actually in the industry are really suffering, and that's just like one level of all the craziness. There's the 280E issues, there's the business issues. It's how you set this up, your payments can get canceled. What happens on social media, marketing? It's cannabis is
Yes.
like we said in the beginning, cannabis has everything that the real world has, but a little upside down. So everybody in this is specialized because there are all these like little quirky things that you have to know or it's not going to work. Like payment processing, you sit in a room full of people who are in the industry, they just talk about it like it's normal to have 7 different payment processing because one's gonna get shut down, so you just move on. It's
Oh
not
my God. I can't even tell you how many sleepless nights I've had as a result of payment processing. And yes, for people listening, Joyce, you just made a great point about you don't ha- you don't have to touch if your business is called the Canna Mom Show or it's called CannaPlanners or it's called whatever CBD. Like you're going to have a longer conversation than a person starting any other business would with your banker.
and it
And
was intentional. So when I started this, the idea of the show is to crush the stigma. So I am trademark I'm a lawyer, so I trademarked the name. I set up my
Mhm.
LLC as the Canna Mom Show. This is very intentional. And
Yes.
every time I went into a bank, the managers would hang out with me and be like, "Hey, I love to smoke pot, but I can't give you an account."
Yep.
I just-
I've had so
so
many similar
yeah, so
conversations. Yeah.
this was an intentional thing. I know I could have done something different, but I chose to go this route, and I'm glad I got a bank, Gardner Financial, just to give a shout out, and
Yes,
they were
small
very
local banks are usually the best. Credit unions are great places to go to,
yep,
as well.
and they should.
Um,
It's a local. Again, these are businesses that are bringing in jobs. We're creating a new industry. I've been saying all year that when we come out of this thing, whatever our pandemic craziness that just happened in America,
mm,
cannabis is here. This is an American product. It's right here. I'm on calls with people talking about hemp industry. You can wear it, you can build it, you can eat it, you can do anything with it. This is an American industry, and if we can get our act together, like even in Kentucky, Like there's a Republican congresswoman in Kentucky who just put in something to have it up to 1% for the hemp instead of 0.3 because 0.3
Right.
is like stupid and it makes it harder for the farmers, right?
I think that passed.
Oh, it did?
It, I think so.
I don't
I
know.
think
But
that
again,
might
and
have
these are
passed.
little,
Yeah.
these are like, these are technical issues of the industry so I know a little bit about almost everything in the industry. So I can
Sure.
talk smart for about a minute and a half on almost any subject. But these are real things across the
You're a
country
lawyer.
that
You're a lawyer.
we're going to talk. So I mean, so these are, so I say it's like the Venn diagram of politics. If you can have a conservative Republican in Kentucky and me up here in liberal Cambridge, Northeast, Northeast in America, New England, this is the Venn diagram. Cannabis is in the middle. This could bring us together.
I completely agree with you. Um, it's impossible to play favorites. I'm curious if you've had a guest that's had a lasting impact on you, something that blew your mind and you've been able to, and it's been with you ever since.
I'll say it's sort of the constant story of hearing women who didn't quite understand what cannabis was and had gone down that long route of other medications until they were almost debilitated and found cannabis as a last resort of
Yeah.
themselves and
That
the
shared
bravery it takes for
experience.
that. But that shared experience across the board. I mean, I can't even tell you how many stories I've heard like this. And the children, and I'm in the law, and you're always supposed to do everything in the best interest of the children, which we never, ever, ever do.
Mm,
But these women, I mean, I don't know if I would have been brave enough to do this, who had serious children with serious illnesses, who were being told we were being told one thing, yet they could see it. They could see it with their own eyes that this was working for their children and were brave enough to heal them. And these women who did this have changed the hearts and minds of so many people. Because so there's a woman who I haven't actually interviewed yet, but I heard her at an event who was a tall, blonde, beautiful businesswoman, was running this business event. It was like one of those women I kept saying was like me, but a little better. She kind of had it all together, a kid, the whole thing. And someone's like, go talk to her. She's got a cannabis story, and she was a pretty conservative woman. She had a very conservative father-in-law in the military. Her child had a seizure disorder,
mm.
and she started using medical cannabis for her child, and transitioned the entire family's perspective of it. Her father-in-law, who never in a million years would have considered this, could see his own grandchild had been healed. So these are the stories that are powerful. Once we get past the stupid things that we're told and our misconceptions and the brainwashing, we can see how this is going to heal people.
Well, keep having those conversations, Joyce. I think even though a common thread between all your stories, I think continually hearing it is is really important for sure. Um, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but similarly to that question uh, is there someone you've spoken to that more people should know about? Is there a particular episode you say start here? This is the episode. Um,
I mean, one of my favorite, just because it was fun, I interviewed Sister Kate from
okay,
Sisters of the Valley.
yeah, yeah,
It's because she has an unusual story. She's a
yeah.
character. If you want to meet a character in the cannabis world,
Oh, I gotta talk to
this is a
her.
woman who transitioned from, basically a Republican financial analyst to starting her own cannabis. This is back to religion. She started her own cannabis religion in California, the
Crazy.
Sisters of the Valley, and she had a very long journey, self-discovery, and she's actually even terms of parenting, like when she tells her story, it's like she's flipped the parenting paradigm on its head. So basically, she was a parent of very entitled children and had a big loss, a divorce.
Mm,
They became very poor, basically. They moved up to California. They became farmers, and they were farming cannabis and vegetables. And her teenagers had to help out because if they wanted to partake of the cannabis, they had to help out in the garden. And they became they were teenagers. So usually teenagers just go off and do their own thing. These teenagers came back to her and were helping her, and were like industrious. So that was impressive. And then she became a nun.
yeah, that's a good one. All right,
So
so
Sister Kate, that was like my first
Mr.
episode
Kate,
of January 2021. That was my first one, and yeah,
we'll
I
link.
think it's just
That's the one
I've been
we'll
adding
link
little
in the
things.
description. I'll link that one in
Okay,
the description here.
and I've been adding little things each time. I've been so my season 1, I did it with my friend Amy. She was my co-host, my Canna sister, but she didn't want to do season 2. So some of the things she had been doing was like she had a favorite thing segment, and I've been adding in special guests. So I had connected to a young man in Boston named Sean. He does cannabis infused meals. He came on as a little segment just to talk about that. I'm going to have Joanna Silver, who wrote a book about growing weed in your garden. I'm going to have her come on in March and do a couple of segments about, growing it because I have no green thumb. This is sort of a joke with my family
Same.
that I'm supposed to have a relationship with the plant, but I cannot keep anything alive except for children.
Well, that's good. Thank God for that.
Which is good. So she's gonna come on and talk about that. So I'm trying to make this more of a, it's like I call it the Canna Mom Show, like the Daily Show. I have music in it. My son actually, so we're gonna add a segment next week. It's a new thing. He has a new release out, so we're gonna insert it in the show.
Awesome.
And I'm always looking for sponsors. So if you're out there, if you want to connect with women who are kind of curious and like to buy stuff, reach out to me because I would love to connect you to my audience.
Well, let's continue that. Why don't you tell the people listening, plug yourself, tell the people where they can find you.
Um,
We'll link them all in the description here in the YouTube video
so
description.
you can find me. I'd like to drive everything to my website. So I'm www.the Mom Show. All my
The
shows are there. The Canna Mom Show. All my shows are there. My blogs are there. Our favorite things are there. Links to some of the affiliates that I'm working with, who connected to the show. If you're looking for some good products, their links are on there as well. I'm also everywhere you can find your favorite podcast, and I am on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and now on Clubhouse.
Clubhouse, the newest thing. Uh, Joyce, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I hope that we can actually do this again sometime. Thank you so much for your time. This has been Joyce Gerber, the executive producer and host of the Canna Mom Show, which you can find at all of the places she just mentioned. We will link most of them in the description here. Joyce, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
This was so fun. Thank you, Will. I had a great time.
Awesome. I've been your host, Will Reed. This is Common SENSimilla. We'll see you next time. Take care.